This is Beat the Closing Line.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Beat the Closing Line. I am your host, Nicole Russo, alongside MLB analyst for thelines.com, Eli Hershkovich and Mo Nuwwarah. Now today we're going to be changing things up a little bit from our usual Thursday episode where we interview a special guest about NFL betting. Today, we're going to be doing an MLB Post-Season Betting Roundtable with special guest Randy Blum, who is an MLB Oddsmaker from Westgate Superbook. Randy, thanks for joining us today. Are you looking forward to MLB Postseason?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And yes, I'm looking forward to it. Love baseball. I know a lot of people complain about the length of the season, but for me, I can't get enough games, and definitely looking forward to the postseason.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here with us. And before we dive into the discussion, as always, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, make sure on Apple Podcasts to subscribe to Beat the Closing Line and leave us a 5-star review for your chance to win an Amazon gift card. Without further ado, let's get into the betting discussion. And Eli and Mo, I'm going to start with you. There were a lot of surprises during the regular season. For one, the Orioles managed to be the most profitable team to back, and they easily cleared their win total. Eli, how did the MLB regular season treat you?
So, unlike Randy, I was not a fan of an 162-game season. I haven't bet baseball in about 2-3 weeks just because the postseason race in terms of which teams are making the playoffs, besides the last NL wildcard spot, was pretty much wrapped up. But up about 4 to 5 units in terms of game-to-game bets. Not a good season for me with MLB futures. I lost on the Marlins win total. I can blame injuries for that, but besides Sandy Alcantara, not a good season for Don Mattingly. Lost the Twins to win the AL Central. Byron Buxton had his injury, but that Twins lineup was brutal in the second half. And then also lost my Dylan C. Cy Young bet that I made at the All-Star break. So not a good futures year for me, but up a little bit in game-by-game bets and really excited to bet some postseason baseball.
And Mo, you are our MLB guy over at The Lines. You do the Coast to Coast MLB podcast. So you've been betting baseball quite frequently. How have things been going for you?
Yeah, another high volume season. Good season for me. It was looking a little hairy. I was looking like I might book my first losing MLB season for a minute there. It took me quite a few months to get into the black, but I ended up making like 30 units. So it was pretty good, but futures was looking tremendous middle to late part of the season. And then some things fell apart. Twins fell apart. And I just want to complain real quick. Rockies over 68.5. Oh my God, that was so painful. I needed like a 4-13 finish and they couldn't do it. It was basically on pace to go over till like the last day. I mean, if they just won the last game, but they were huge underdogs against the Dodgers, who for some reason pitched Kershaw. Come on, put everyone on ice. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, very frustrating losing that one because that was one of my bigger plays. But I think I still made a small profit, but it was looking like I was going to make tons on futures.
All right, well, let's hope the postseason is a little bit, both profitable, smaller, but we want to be profitable in a big way. We're going to take a look at some World Series futures. Right now, the Dodgers are the favorite to win the series at plus 300, all the way down to the Guardians at plus 3,500. Obviously, you can find all of those odds over at thelines.com on our MLB World Series page. Randy, I'm going to swing this one over to you. Right now, what's the liability like in the World Series futures market at Westgate, and is there one team that you see value in?
Yeah, as far as liability, there's two teams that we're kind of hoping to avoid in both the pennant and the World Series. First one is the Mariners. We have big liability on them. We were expecting some regression from them this year after, a lot of people forget they had a 90-plus win season last year because they didn't even make the playoffs. But, they had a big season last year. We were kind of expecting a little bit of a regression. But, they made a couple of trades right before the season started. And obviously Julio Rodriguez was a huge impact player for them. So, we're sweating that one pretty big. Would be a high six-figure loss for us if the Mariners won the World Series between the pennant and the World Series. And then the other team that we do have some liability on is the Cardinals. We took a lot of bets on them from the All-Star break, heading towards the second half of the season, heading into the second half of the season, when the Brewers kind of started to fade a bit. They were a popular play among people at the book here. So those are the two teams that we basically have some liability on. As far as value, obviously it always depends on what number you can get. But the Blue Jays are an interesting team to me because, they were the ones that were expected to win this division. Yankees ended up having a great season, but they were the preseason favorites, although it was very close between the Yankees, Red Sox, not the Red Sox, Yankees, Rays, and Toronto. They were all right there, but Blue Jays were the ones that were supposed to take the next step and win the division. That didn't end up happening, but it seems like they're starting to get hot at the right time. So, depending on what odds you can find out there, if you can find 20-1 or higher, that might be some excellent value there.
All right, next up, we've got some questions for Mo and Eli. Mo, is there a World Series futures bet that intrigues you?
There's a couple that I thought were reasonable. One of them is my Atlanta Braves. There's a plus 600 out there I'm seeing. I think that's slightly too high. When I tried to plug in some of the what I kind of estimate the series prices to be into a parlay calculator, it came out like plus 570. So I think if you just want to gamble on a decent price, I think Braves plus 600 is fine. Just basically the way the bracket broke down was really, really good for them. I think the Mets and Padres are both stronger than the Phillies and Cardinals. So it's pretty great draw for them. Not having to face basically only having to face a max of one of Mets and Dodgers is pretty huge when the Mets and Dodgers most likely have to beat each other and then also the Braves. So really, really favorable bracket for them. And then I actually think Rays 30-1 isn't too bad. Once again, I plugged some series prices in. I came out with about 31-1. So I think any price around that is going to be okay. Once again, very favorable bracket. I'm not really a big believer in the Yankees. Their bullpen injuries have me a little worried. I don't think the offense is as good as it played in the first half of the season. So, obviously facing the Guardians round one is pretty good, although, Guardians have beat my brains in all year. So I can't be, I should be honest and say that I've probably been underestimating them all season.
As most people do.
Eli, what about you?
Yeah, I lost some money fading Cleveland down the stretch too. I think Mo and I were a little too invested in the Twins. But one World Series future that I'm looking at is the Astros at plus 425. A little chalky in a sense, but when you look at field independent pitching, so what the pitcher can control versus your typical ERA, your traditional metrics that some bettors still may look at, the Astros have the best FIP among starting rotations and bullpens across all of baseball. When you think about Verlander, Valdez, who made a case for the Cy Young down the stretch, McCullers might be in the bullpen, which actually bolsters their bullpen, but I don't know if he starts in the playoffs. We'll see as it rolls along. And then Javier's stuff, even though his command can be a bit erratic. So 1, 2, questionable 3 because of McCullers, and then 3, 4, whatever you want to call Javier. I love the Astros rotation and their bullpen too. And you can make the case that the Dodgers have the deepest lineup in baseball, but then you look at Houston with Altuve, Pena, who replaced Correa at short, Alvarez, Bregman, Tucker, Gurriel, Mancini, Velasquez, who they got from Boston at the break, and the McCormick. I think that's the deepest lineup in baseball. And defensively too, you have to trust Houston because gloves are important really in October. So I like Houston up and down here, and plus 425. Again, not the best quote unquote value if you're looking for a long shot like Mo threw out there with the Rays, but big on the Astros, and I took some Houston plus 425 over at DraftKings.
All right, it's time to start handicapping some of these series, and we're going to start with the first game in Friday's wild card round, which is none other than the Cleveland Guardians against the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, Tampa Bay has the worst record of any playoff team, but was dealing with a bit of injuries throughout the season. Now, the Guardians were red hot in the second half after being as high as plus 1,000 to win the AL Central back in June. Cleveland is minus 130 to win the series with the Rays at plus 112, and the Guardians are minus 120 on the money line to win game one. Randy, do you have a bet you like in this series?
I don't know if I would bet it, but I've always been high on the Rays. I just love the way they operate and run their organization. With Franco coming back from injury, that's going to be a big plus for them. And like we were just talking about, everybody, I don't think anyone expected the Guardians to do what they did this year. I think if I remember right, before the season started, Fangraphs had them at 7% chance to win that division. So, yeah, it's been an amazing season for them, what they've done. And like you were saying, they've been the second hottest team in the second half of the season. So it's hard to keep picking against them. But for me, I just feel like Tampa's going to, figure a way to pull it out. Like I said, I don't necessarily have a bet in this series, but I do like Tampa to move on. They struggled a little bit down the stretch, but like you said, they had some injuries. And I think they're going to figure out a way to advance.
Mo, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I definitely lean towards Tampa Bay as well. Better pitching, better offense. Small disadvantages, I would say, in the pen. Guardians definitely have a better defense. It's just crazy to see that the numbers on Cleveland, honestly. They're the only playoff team that has both below average pitching staff as far as the starters. If you go by FIP minus, which normalizes for like league and park. So they're below average starting pitching and below average offense, which is kind of insane to say about a playoff team. I do think the Rays offense is underrated by the numbers too, because of the reasons Randy was saying. Basically, Wander Franco missed a huge chunk of the season. They had tons of injuries overall. So I think, honestly, the numbers do underrate Tampa. I think Tampa at anything around plus 110 is fine. I know they're missing Brandon Lau. That could be big. Honestly, my main concerns here is going to be basically what they get out of Shane McClanahan. He was pretty poor late in the season. That being said, I feel like the Rays were definitely trying to cap his innings, so they weren't having him go deep into the games. I think he knew that he's basically just trying to keep his arm loose. I like Rays game one because Cleveland is so poor hitting lefties, and I am interested at anything around plus 110 for the series.
Eli, are you in agreement here?
I'm not going Guardians, but I don't have a bet in the series or for game one. Bieber's peripherals are a little questionable to me, a 2.88 ERA versus a 3.51 xFIP, so he's overperformed according to some of the advanced metrics. But he does rely on the fastball and cutter, which the Rays have a bottom 10 run value. Their lineup is a bottom 10 run value against those two pitches. So even with Franco back, those numbers are accounted for that. And then McClanahan, the swinging strike rate since he's come back from his injury, Mo touched on that a little bit, down from 16.3% to 9.5%. And while the Guardians' walk rate isn't super high, Kwan and Ramirez at the top will make you work. So maybe he goes 5 and the Rays toss it to the bullpen, but this bullpen isn't what it's been in years past for Cash to utilize. So no bet for me in game one of the series, Nicole.
All right, we're going to move on now, but stay in the American League and tackle Blue Jays, who are the 4 seed, versus the Mariners, who are the 5 seed. Now, Toronto turned its season around after firing manager Charlie Montoyo. Julio Rodriguez, who is the soon-to-be AL Rookie of the Year, paced Seattle's lineup, and the Mariners bolstered their rotation at the deadline by acquiring Luis Castillo, who starts in game one against Alek Manoah. Now, the Mariners are plus 125 to win the series with the Blue Jays at minus 150. And in game one, the Blue Jays are also the favorites here at minus 145 on the money line. Randy, give us some insight into this one.
Yeah, this should be an entertaining, even although brief series, right? Best of 3, but should be entertaining. A lot of great young talent going to be on the field. Like you said, Julio Rodriguez going to win Rookie of the Year. Obviously, with the Blue Jays, they have Vlad and all the other guys from. It's an interesting series. I think it could come down to something simple like which team can control their emotions and not get too overhyped. Mariners haven't been in the playoffs in a long time. Blue Jays, all with young kids right now who have never played in the postseason as well. Mariners did make that trade for the pitcher, like you guys said. That can definitely be huge for them. I couldn't bet Toronto here, but I would need a little bit higher of a price to take the dog in this series. Like I said, we have a ton of liability, at work on the Mariners. So I'm just going to stick with my rooting interest from that perspective and root for Toronto. But if the price did get a little bit higher, I do think there would definitely be value there on the Mariners.
Eli, we'll go to you next on this one.
Yeah, so I'm going to go against Randy's rooting interest here. I'm not taking Seattle to win the series, but I like Seattle on the money line. I got them earlier this morning at plus 128 on the money line to win game one. So starting with the starting pitchers, Manoah and Castillo is a great matchup, like Randy mentioned. It's intriguing from a lineup standpoint in terms of the star power and then also on the bump. And Manoah, I give a slight edge to. I mean, in terms of stuff, his strikeout rate, he has one of the best arms across baseball. And then Castillo, even though he didn't have the best September, his ERA versus FIP is pretty even. So he hasn't overperformed, he hasn't underperformed, but he also shouldn't take much of a dip, even against this jacked up of a lineup that Toronto has. And then a couple of things that I like about Seattle's lineup versus Manoah, on top of the fact that the Mariners have a bullpen advantage, you would think, with Castillo, the former Rays closer and reliever, Munoz and Sewald, might even use Brash if Castillo only goes 4 or 5 in this game. Also could save him for game 3. But Seattle has a top 10 run value in terms of their lineup against sinkers and fastballs and even sliders. But Manoah's top 2 pitches down the stretch were sinkers and fastballs. Rodriguez, Suarez, France all match up really well against Manoah. So as good as Manoah is, I think the market is overvaluing him a little bit in this game, especially against Seattle's lineup. So I took Mariners plus 128 on the money line, like I mentioned. I don't like the series price because I don't like the matchup for Seattle in game 2, especially if they go with Robbie Ray against a lineup that Toronto has that favors really well against lefties. But if this does get to a game 3, I'll probably look to back George Kirby, who had a top 10 WAR among starting pitchers in the second half. But only bet for me right now is Seattle in game 1.
Mo, why don't you close this one off for us?
I think I'm in the exact same boat as Randy. I have Toronto plus 1,000 from the preseason. Unfortunately, you can get a better price now, but I'm just going to have to ride with it. So I'm just rooting that on. I have to say in this one, I am really concerned about what would happen in a game 3 for the Jays. So I'm really hoping that they get this done in 2. I have them as pretty solid favorites in the first 2 games. But game 3 could be very, very dicey. I'm guessing they would throw Jose Barrios, but man,
Yikes.
He had a really rough season. And I think that I have them projected as home underdogs in the last game. Slight, but I don't know if that would actually be the case. But I think the Mariners would have a significantly better pitcher on the mound at that point. So I'm really hoping the Jays can get this done in 2.
All right, guys, it's time to move on over to the National League. The Cardinals, who are the 3 seed, are going to take on the Phillies, the 6 seed. St. Louis was pretty hot in the second half, overtaking the Brewers in the NL Central. Now, the soon-to-be NL MVP, Paul Goldschmidt, was the engine behind it. Meanwhile, the Phillies are backed by starters Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, while star Bryce Harper struggled with a .615 OPS from September 1st onwards. Now, the Morning Brew did put out a pretty funny tweet that I want to touch on here on social media, and it said that over the past 100 years, the surest sign of an oncoming financial crisis has been a Philadelphia-based baseball team winning the World Series. This has happened in 1929, 1980, 2008, and potentially in 2022. So I think for all of our wallets, maybe we shouldn't be hoping for the Phillies to win this one, and they are the underdogs in this series, sitting at plus 115 to win it. The Cardinals are at minus 135 for game 1. We have the Cardinals and the Phillies both at minus 110 on the money line. Randy, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is an interesting series from a couple of different standpoints. For one, I just saw before I came back to get on with you guys, Cardinals actually are going to throw Quintana in Game 1, which I thought was very interesting. Wainwright would have been on normal rest if they had chosen to go that way. So, what I'm thinking is that they want a lefty out there with Schwarber and Harper going to be up there. So it's an interesting strategy. So I'm just be interested to see how it pays off. But with as good as Zach Wheeler has been, this game is a true pick. Quintana had a great season, unexpected great season this year. But I just thought it was interesting that they would pass up their best pitcher for the last how many years on normal rest. So we'll see how that plays out. But as far as the series as a whole, the Cardinals had an interesting year, obviously with Pujols having a resurgence, but Goldschmidt, he's been awful for, I don't know, 6 weeks now. I mean, like you said, he's probably still going to win the MVP, but if he doesn't start hitting again, I'm not sure. I see some value on the Phillies winning this series if he continues to struggle, which he hasn't really shown any signs of breaking out of it in any way down the stretch.
Mo, what's your take on this one?
I took the Phillies, and I like the Phillies here. Plus 115 is out there. I think it's good. I think this series is honestly a coin flip. So, yeah, definitely some value on the Phillies to me. And I like the Phillies in Game 1 as well. Just to piggyback off of what Randy was saying, it sounds like Adam Wainwright is experiencing the dreaded, quote, dead arm. Not really sure what that means, but I can never imagine a dead arm being a good thing. So it is an interesting series, like he was saying, because I don't know what St. Louis is going to do with their pitching. I'm guessing it's going to be Montgomery Game 2.
It sounds like Michaelis, Mo. That's what the tweets are saying.
Okay, yeah. I mean, then I guess Montgomery would. I'm surprised that they wouldn't want to go with Montgomery. He's been so good for them. But yeah, I do think the Phillies have a pretty big advantage, both in the bullpen and in the starting pitching. Right. And then honestly,
they got
the
Nola for
only
Game 2, so I mean,
reliever that is remotely trustworthy for the Cardinals is Helsley. He's been awesome. But it's pretty. I know that Eli hates the Phillies pen, but man, first of all, the Phillies pen was better than the Cardinals pen. But also, Helsley, I guess, has like some problem, jammed finger or something he's dealing with. If he's not 100%, then they might have zero trustworthy bullpen arms. That's a pretty scary spot to be in when you're going in with your season on the line here. I think the Phillies is a solid play.
Oh no, does this mean the financial crisis is coming? Eli, what do you think?
That's what Nicole's biggest concern is. Not about our baseball bets doing well, but
it's not the bets.
The state of right, exactly. I will say Mo made it out to seem like I was going to back the Cardinals with the way I was talking about the Phillies bullpen, but now with Quintana starting in Game 1, thank you, Randy, for mentioning that, because it sounded like earlier this morning and late last night that it was going to be Michaelis Game 1 and then Quintana or Montgomery potentially in Game 2. But even with those struggles being accounted for with Harper and Schwarber against lefties, or especially against Quintana, the Phillies have the 6th highest weighted runs created plus this season against left-handed starters. So I wasn't planning on betting Phillies Game 1, but now that Quintana is going, and maybe who knows what's going to happen with Wainwright, right? It sounds like it doesn't sound like he's going to pitch in this series, but maybe he backs Michaelis if it's a shorter outing because Michaelis has some command problems. I get starting Quintana in Game 1 from the standpoint of experience, but yeah, I like the Phillies in terms of their lineup matching up against Quintana, even with those struggles being accounted for with Harper and Schwarber. And then you get Aaron Nola, who's been one of the best starting pitchers in the second half. Top 10 in WAR, similar to Kirby among starting pitchers, like I mentioned. I think Philly sweep is in play. That price is around plus 300 too. I haven't bet anything there, but with Quintana starting Game 1, I'll be on the Phillies.
Is that something you guys had seen on Twitter that Wainwright is a good chance he won't pitch in this series?
I've seen rumors about that, Randy. Nothing for sure, but the dead arm stuff that Mo mentioned and coupling with some Cardinals beat reporters saying that, again, maybe he pitches in relief, but it doesn't sound like he's going to start.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I had not seen that. That makes me like the Phillies even more in this series. It's he might not be what he was 10 years ago, but he's a veteran. He knows how to get the big outs and stuff like that. So yeah, that information definitely makes me like the Phillies even more.
All right, so some hot news coming in while we're filming this. Thanks to Eli for taking a look at Twitter while we're on this. I like the multitasking. All right, guys, it's time to move on to the last of the wild card series. Now we have the New York Mets, who are the 4 seed, limping into the postseason after blowing the NL East lead to defending champion Braves. Now you have ace pitchers Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, and they are banged up. On the other side, the Padres, who are the 5 seed, bolstered their World Series hopes after trading for Juan Soto at the deadline. Closer Josh Hader also seemed to have better command down the stretch. Now, we have been taking a look at some of this Met strategy, and it sounds like the plan is to start Scherzer in game 1 and ideally not use deGrom at all in this round. If they win game 1, it looks like they're going to Chris Bassett in game 2. The Mets are favored to win the series at minus 194, with the Padres sitting at plus 164. And taking a look at game 1, Mets are favored here as well, sitting at minus 160, with the Padres at plus 130 on the money line. Randy, final one, give us your take on this series.
Yeah, this to me, this series is all about how the Mets respond to what happened getting swept by Atlanta. They were the better team as far as them against the Padres throughout the season. They have their 2 aces, even though they haven't been what they normally are the last couple of starts. They have a better lineup than they've had in years past. I just think it's all about how they respond now. Are they still thinking about that series in Atlanta and how they blew the division? Or are they ready to play the Padres and just take this have Scherzer out there and just put a stranglehold on it right from the beginning? The Padres, to me, very up and down throughout the season. They made the big trade for Soto, but to be honest, he wasn't really that good for them down the stretch. Second half of the season, after the trade deadline, Brandon Drury, I can make the argument he was a much better pickup, just stats wise. Obviously, Soto, big picture is the better player, but I just think, like I said, I just think this one comes down to the if the Mets respond and do what they should do, because they are the better team, and they were the better team throughout the season. That said, I can't bet the Mets because in a best of 3, the price is just too high for my liking.
Eli, what's your take on this series?
Yeah, the Scherzer oblique thing, and then deGrom with the blister because he didn't pitch well down the stretch, and Scherzer had the off start against the Braves. So it's difficult from that standpoint. But I will say I think BetMGM and FanDuel opened with, in terms of game 1, opened with the Padres or Mets at minus 200, Padres around plus 160. That got bet down and adjusted down fairly quickly, and now we're sitting at Mets minus 160-ish on the money line in game 1 and Padres plus 130. I'm going to be saving a bet, though, until game 2, especially if the Mets were to win game 1, like you mentioned, Nicole, and then save deGrom and pitch Bassett, because Blake Snell, I keep mentioning pitching WAR in the second half, and he had the second best WAR among starting pitchers in the second half of the season. It seems like he's back to Rays form when they made that run to the World Series 2 or 3 years ago. So I know this Padres lineup has struggled down the stretch. Randy mentioned Soto struggles, so it's tough from that standpoint. Darvish, going back to game 1, again, Scherzer has pitched really well against the Mets this season. That's because he uses the cutter so often, and the Mets struggle to hit cutters all year, and their lineup also might be overvalued just in general. But I'm going to be looking to back Blake Snell, either first 5 or full game in game 2, assuming he does start game 2. But no series bet for me, Nicole, and no bet in game 1.
All right, Mo, time for you to take us across the finish line. Any bets for you in the series or in this first game?
I definitely agree with the game 1 move. Minus 200 is way too high. I had minus 150 as fair for game 1. That being said, I took the Mets, minus 175 at DraftKings. I think it's a little too low. I'm seeing minus 200s at some other spots, and I think that's right. Pretty big pitching advantage as long as as long as DeGrom and Scherzer are right. And I think it's such an advantage to be able to shorten the game too. How good their bullpen's been. I mean, Edwin Diaz has been unhittable all year. The Padres
50% strikeout rate.
Yeah, it's just outrageous how good he's been. And DeGrom, I know that he struggled a little bit, but I mean, his strikeout numbers are still absurd and not walking anybody. I mean, it's just stuff on contact. I don't think it's anything really to worry about. Basically, I think the series just comes down to the offenses. Are the Padres as bad as their offense has played this year? I mean, if they play better, like they should, their talent says they should, then yeah, they're going to be right there. But they haven't really performed as well as their talent level. So I do think the Mets are a little underpriced if you can get around minus 170. Otherwise, it's probably just a fair line. So yeah, I took Mets, but if they lose, as a Braves fan, it's going to be good for me. So I guess that's okay.
Happy.
Likely no Marte for the Mets too. Just a quick note there. He hasn't been ruled out for the series, but that's big against a lefty like Snell. At least I'm looking towards game 2.
That about wraps it up for today's episode. Thank you for joining us. And Randy, thanks for coming in and giving us your insight and giving us a look at the numbers at Westgate Superbook. If you are betting any of these games, good luck on your MLB postseason bets. We will be back on Tuesday to discuss the NFL opening lines, and we will see you next time.